Hey everybody, it's Jason Blaha here, and today I thought I would chat with you guys a little bit about this whole concept of testosterone release as a result of training, and even HGH release as a result of training, because these are topics that people want to talk about and they act like they're significant. And I don't want people to think that I'm saying that testosterone and growth hormone do not matter for muscle growth, because that would actually be just as profoundly ignorant of a statement as the idea that with how much of them you release has any impact at all on muscle growth, recovery, anything else, right? It would be just as ignorant of a statement. So I don't want people to think that I'm saying that, but you hear people all the time discuss actual training methodologies where the amount of growth hormone or testosterone that you release from doing an exercise or a certain training protocol or something has an impact on your muscle growth. And the truth is, that's a very outdated concept. It's stuff people were talking about even in the 80s. Supposed experts, these are bodybuilding experts, these were not real experts, right? These weren't people who actually studied anything in a laboratory or had any verifiable means of measuring muscle growth, with sophisticated equipment. Who came up with theories like this, and they've been studied and looked at. I mean, to the point to where we have meta-analysis that's looked at this, right? And I discussed this a few years ago, and it's one that I need to come back around to, because I've had people ask questions lately, and I've seen other YouTubers actually propose the idea that doing something like standing calf raises because of all the weight put upon you causes this growth hormone release and therefore more muscle growth and all this other nonsense. It's not based on reality, guys. This is bro science. This is pseudoscience. All right, the meta-analysis, and I've linked it before. It's not even that hard to find for anyone who wants to find it. Looked at transient fluctuations in hormone release from training. You know what they found? There was zero correlation between either testosterone or growth hormone release at the end of a workout and the amount of hypertrophy that was being stimulated over time. In fact, the hormone that they found that was the most beneficial is the one that everyone's scared of, right? It was cortisol. This shouldn't come as no surprise. You know what was found? That the amount of cortisol that was released at the end of a workout session was positively correlated with muscle growth. In other words, when they studied lifters, they found that the people who produced the most cortisol measurement at the end of their workouts over that same period of time tended to gain more muscle. But what they found was that there was no correlation between either growth hormone and testosterone elevation. In other words, transient fluctuations in those two hormones don't seem to impact muscle growth. In fact, the only thing on those that seems to impact muscle growth is prolonged testosterone levels. And it usually has to be very, very significant. In other words, if someone's testosterone levels only go up 10 or 20%, that actually, and it stays there, that's usually not even correlated with measurable muscle growth, right? And people forget that when they think about people who are using anabolics. They're forgetting that some of these studies that have looked at very strong muscle growth in anabolics or testosterone, what have they found? That people are injecting like 4 times what the body could even produce in that same week. In other words, they have the testosterone of 4 men, right? Guys who have the testosterone levels of 3, 4, 5 men all in their body at the same time, and it stays there all week long. Due to people putting it into their body, they gain more muscle. But someone who just has a slightly elevated level, that's actually not even correlated with muscle growth. And the amount you produce from training is absolutely not correlated. It's been studied in meta-analysis. They found nothing. So people would say, well, why cortisol? Because cortisol is indicative of more work done. In other words, cortisol is a stress hormone. And if you've produced a lot of cortisol in a training session, you probably did a lot of work. Cortisol is also associated with breaking down muscle protein. So when people talk about tearing down muscle, that's nonsense. It's not physical tearing, it's chemical breaking of the protein through things like cortisol disrupting the proteins at the chemical level. That's what's oftentimes associated with muscle growth. And it's because it's a catabolic response. Well, that makes sense, doesn't it? That catabolism of the muscle tissue, because you train muscle tissue enough to disrupt it, would cause more muscle growth or be correlated with it, of course, because your body tends to reach homeostasis. If it's had muscles that are trained to the point to where your body's breaking them down, it seems to allow for a larger anabolic response afterwards, right? Your body tries to balance the scales back out. And given sufficient rest and recovery and everything else, that tends to be associated with muscle growth. You've disrupted the muscle tissue as a result of training it slightly beyond its capabilities, or its capabilities at least that it can do comfortably, right? There's a certain amount of discomfort associated with effective training, whether it's through mechanical tension, and that would be the weight that a muscle is subjected to at any given angle, or whether it's a product of metabolic fatigue, which means the muscle's just done more work than it really can handle effectively, right? You've pushed it to its limits. That's the same thing. You also can get an anabolic response from that. But the point is, this whole idea that training in such a way that the amount of testosterone or growth hormone that you produce is in any way associated with muscle growth is just not based upon reality. It's been looked at, it's been studied, it's just not true. Now, I'm not telling you that trying to have healthy testosterone level isn't beneficial. Eating a diet that allows for more testosterone, having a lifestyle that allows for more testosterone, yeah, that actually might have real benefits. But here's the difference. Someone who has a good diet that gets all the essential fatty acids and even the dietary cholesterol and other stuff that you want that might be associated with elevated testosterone, that's there all the time, right? Someone who gets plenty of rest, or who even maintains a certain mindset that can be associated with more testosterone production. And yeah, your mentality affects that. There are psychological factors that impact testosterone levels. It should come as no surprise. If you think about it, there are certain behaviors associated with high testosterone levels, and it works both directions. It's not just that higher testosterone produces certain behaviors produce higher testosterone. Certain mindsets, mentalities, and that's a whole nother topic. That's probably something I could delve into later. But you're talking about having elevated testosterone levels all the time as a result of lifestyle. That might be slightly correlated with more muscle growth. But there's a difference between that and that little amount that you have difference as a result of training. Maybe someone trains too long. Maybe lifting heavier. And believe me, guys, I'm all about lifting heavy. Right, I'm all about even max effort training. But let's be realistic here. The testosterone production as a result of that is in no way correlated with muscle growth. You want to know what's correlated with muscle growth? The extra tension. Subjecting the muscle to a very, very heavy amount of tension. Yeah, that's associated with it. But it's not the testosterone. It's just the straight mechanical tension. It's hitting that muscle with a heavy weight. But, fatigue also can do the same thing, right? Muscles also grow pretty effectively just from sheer metabolic fatigue. In other words, repping even a moderate weight out too close to muscle failure, especially for multiple sets, you know what? That also produces muscle growth. But the point is, these things are not associated with it. And if you get caught up in this mentality of, I'm going to limit my specific training volume, or I'm going to only use this sort of training style because it's going to impact my anabolic hormones meaningfully, but you're focusing on the wrong hormones, well, that's not going to work. And you know what? Even those hormones don't even help you always. Like even knowing that cortisol is more associated with it, it's generally associated with more training volume, more fatigue. Well, that's usually associated with more muscle growth, but there are limits to that too. There's limits to that because you have to work within your maximum recoverable volume. You have to recover from that training. In fact, until you've recovered from that training, you might not even fully start the growth process. So training with more volume than you're going to recover from can limit the amount of growth time you get every week, even if the stimulus is really good. So there's a balancing act to be had there. But you know what? Worrying about the hormone aspects of it is not going to help you. So while we have this interesting information, it's not really useful, is it? It's not useful because it's not about the hormones. It's about the training stimulus. So I would suggest to people, when you hear someone say something as profoundly ignorant as doing this form of training will cause you to gain more muscle because of testosterone or growth hormone release, that's completely ignorant nonsense. This has been studied and looked at as not true. And it doesn't mean that the training style that they're promoting doesn't work. They might actually be promoting an extremely effective training protocol, but they're promoting it for the wrong reasons. Now, you might end up doing the right thing, but you're doing it for the wrong reasons. So just remember that. Don't get obsessed over the amount of anabolic hormones your body produces as a result of training, because it's been looked at and it's actually been found that it doesn't actually matter. What matters in terms of your gains is the amount of fatigue you create, the amount of tension you subject muscles to, how much work you do, and how well you recover from it, what food you give it, how much rest you give it, right? Those are the factors that matter, not how much testosterone you have at the end of the workout. Completely irrelevant. All right, guys, but that's really all I have to say on that today. I hope it's been informative, and I will talk to you guys next time.